everybody. Welcome. I'm Giulia Coinaldi, Director of Inclusive Economies at the Thomson Reuters Foundation. I'm delighted to be here at the TÜYID Sustainable Investment Summit 2022, organized by the Turkish Investor Relations Society. The theme of this year's summit is more than a checklist, and we heard about circular economy and aligning measurement. And now we take a deep dive into the problem of greenwashing and how to avoid it. I'm here with two distinguished experts, Jason Perks, Senior Director at DNVGL, Steering Committee Member at UK SSD, and Rose Easton, Signatory Relation Director at Principle for Responsible Investment. Welcome to you both.
Hi.
Yes, hi. And today companies are making more and more claims and commitment on how to ensure their resulting impact for people and planet. And how do we ensure sustainable and responsible investment changes business practices and doesn't actually fuel greenwashing? The environmentalist Jay Westfield coined the terms greenwashing in 1986 in a critical essay on the Save the Towers movement in hotels, which had little impact, but mostly saved hotel money. And now the term is used widely for false claims around climate, but also claims around social issues. EcoAge last year published a very interesting paper on the greenwashing machine that underlines how it works and how it becomes more and more obstacles for real change. Kenneth P. Packer observes in the May-June 2021 issue of the Harvard Business Review that evidence shows that the amount of company reporting on GRI standard has exponentially growth. And according to Global Sustainable Investment Alliance, social responsible investment has grown to more than 30 trillion, 1/3 of professionally managed assets. In the same years though, emissions have continued to grow and environmental damage has accelerated, as well as inequality. Also, the UN Global Compact review of the last decade of action reports showcase how business made progress on SDG, but SDG are not yet embedded in corporate purpose, governance, and strategy for the majority of business. Therefore, there are not enough concrete action, especially on social issues. And we all know that action is desperately needed to tackle climate crisis and inequality, and immediate action. Because of this lack of concrete action, the movement around legislation and mandatory disclosure is growing in the EU, USA, and worldwide. Today, we explore what is the right mix of legislation, standardization, and practice that will tackle greenwashing and move us forward. Hence, let me bring in our fantastic speakers. Jason, Rose, can you please introduce yourself and define for the audience what is greenwashing and how is your organization approaching it?
Thanks, Julia. Shall I kick off?
Yes, please, Rose.
Lovely. Well, look, I'm Rose Easton. As Julia says, I'm the Director of Signatory Relations for Europe, Middle East and Africa at the UN-supported Principles for Responsible Investment. I joined the PRI about 6 months ago, and I've spent my career in the financial services sector in asset management, working closely with a number of large asset owners on their sustainable investment strategies. So definition of greenwashing, according to the EU taxonomy regulation, greenwashing refers to the practice of gaining an unfair competitive advantage by marketing a product or a company as environmentally friendly, when in fact the basic environmental standards have not been met. So in terms of our organization, well, the PRI's primary purpose is to work to achieve a sustainable global financial system. And we do that by encouraging good governance through integrity and accountability. And the problem with greenwashing is, look, it erodes those efforts by jeopardizing market integrity, by creating sort of unreliable standards, and it erodes the effort that we're trying to put in to protect investors. If products and companies are being mislabeled, that protection can't exist. In addition to undermining a sustainable financial system, greenwashing also poses serious reputational and financial risks to investors. It can result in reputational damage, regulatory fines, and a sizable impact on investee companies' share prices. It affects actually all players in the responsible sector, investment sector. It even affects the PRI. Actually, in our most recent strategy plan, we have like a 3-year strategy plan for 2021 to 24. We identify greenwashing as one of our key strategic risks because it really undermines our signatories' status. We're a member organisation. We actually really pride ourselves on accountability. And our role is to ensure that signatories meet industry and regional standards, and that our signatories consistently work to improve their responsible investing practices. We set out 6 principles, and the idea is to establish a sort of clear structure for setting and enforcing expectations from our signatories, precisely actually to overcome greenwashing. We expect all our signatories, whether they invest actively or passively, to be what we call active asset owners. The PRI's reporting and assessment framework then actually monitors our signatories' ESG integration practices and the commitments that they make. And effectively, what this does is really hold them to account. In addition to reporting, to maintain and strengthen expectations, we also have a set of minimum requirements that they have to meet within 2 years of joining. And we'll engage with those that don't meet these to hopefully see improvements. However, we do expect them to walk the walk on responsible investing. And, as a measure of last resort, we will delist those that are either unwilling or unable to meet the standards that we've asked them to commit to. And then just look, one final point around the PRI is that we've got a dedicated policy team that works very closely with the regulators on some of the key directives, such as the EU taxonomy, SFDR, that looks to categorize sustainable and non-sustainable activities to help protect the financial services industry and provide greater clarity.
Thank you, Rose. And Jason.
Hi, good afternoon or morning. I'm not quite sure when we're going to be going live on this, but it's great to be part of this panel, and thanks for giving us a chance to talk to you all. My name is Jason Perks. I'm a Senior Director at DNV. Focusing on sustainability, I've been helping mostly large multinationals deal with sustainable issues for the last 25 years. That's gone from helping GRI develop its reporting standards and helping hundreds of companies produce and assure reports, through to helping develop strategies and all those many investors use when they is a trust. We're not owned by anyone, we're owned by ourselves, and our purpose is to safeguard life, property, the environment. Our vision is really to be a trusted voice in global transformations for companies. And there's 12,000 of us around the world, and really we're focused on helping business understand how it can build trust and deliver on its commitments to society, to stakeholders and to shareholders. And I think this is where greenwashing comes in. It's all really about trust. Greenwashing, in whatever form it takes, undermines that trust. Trust is really the glue that holds us together, and also the oil that's, that oils the wheels of our relationships, whether we're an employee, whether we're a shareholder, or whether we're a customer of a company. The Adamant Trust Barometer survey of 2022 showed that business is now actually back on top. 61% of people trust business as an institution more than any other institutions. When I was running courses about trust 15 years ago, business was way down the list. But actually, there's been a massive erosion of other institutions, particularly government, but also NGOs. And now people look to business as a trusted vehicle to tackle society's challenges. So I think this speaks very much to the challenges with ESG, that actually now society is looking to business to be the trusted partner in addressing our societal challenges. And if business conducts greenwash or isn't honest about the challenges faced or the ambition gap. We'll talk about this a bit later. This isn't honest about that and isn't clear about how it's going to help address those challenges. That really amounts to greenwash. It's not just about omission of information, it's actually about not recognizing the challenges. So greenwash is really a key aspect of ensuring that business plays effectively, and also the opportunities that it has to be that trusted partner and gain commercial advantage from, and also reduce risks that can arise from actually not being honest about what's going on, being honest about their performance, and being honest about the plans and strategies that they have to address the challenges and be a successful.
And thank you, Jason. Rose, you both raised very good point around accountability, trust, and in enabling to move us forward in sustainable, responsible finance. And we know that when you mention greenwashing, it focuses already immediately on climate, but greenwashing is done on the E, S, and the G. And the Thomson Reuters Foundation has published a paper and tried to promote amongst investors the importance of addressing social issues seriously to ensure we have a positive impact on an effect on people. What are your thoughts? What does a successful, sustainable, and responsible investment looks like, in your view? Jason, shall we start with you and then move to Rose?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think sustainable, responsible investment is, well, first of all, it's a massively growing area of finance. And we're talking to companies now which are coming to us saying, look, we are not going to get access to funding. Not just, this isn't just sustainability linked finance or sustainability loans, just access to standard finance if we don't address some of the key issues that we know we need to. So it's moving from an opportunity not just to get better access to finance, but actually increasingly to access to finance if organizations are addressing some of these key issues. More formalized. So I think it's vital to understand their ESG issues, and that they then I think that's key to pushing in the future. I think the other thing that I'd like to say is I totally agree that it's not just environmental, it's environmental, social, and governance. And when I say social, I think it's social economic. It's not just a pure social. It's impossible to separate out social and economic progress. So social side here, and I don't think you can separate those things. But I think if you look at key failures around the world of greenwashing or corporate failures and not understanding sustainability topics, then usually the underlying cause is a lack of decent governance. Yeah, either they don't understand the issue, or they understand the issue and they make poor decisions because they don't understand the consequences of the issue. And a really good example, in my view, is Rio Tinto's blowing up some mines in Australia back in 2020. It was a decision made by the company in spite of the fact they have very clear values and policies around working with Indigenous people. This resulted in the CEO resigning. And at the end of the day, he said it was basically, I hold the final accountability of this and I didn't discharge my governance duties. And I think that really summarizes how an action which is really creating a social damage was not understood properly by the organization, or if it wasn't understood, it wasn't sufficiently governed and the wrong decisions were made. And I think governance is the core cause of the problems of greenwash or a lack of information which makes decisions which damage ESG outcomes.
Thank you, Jason. I think that's a very appropriate example. And Rose, in what is your perspective? What does responsible sustainable investment looks like?
Yeah, look, and I think, Jason raises, such an important point around governance and about its understanding these things. A good sustainable investment really, I think, is a company that demonstrates that it's trying to do the right thing by both people and the planet. And I think there's a series of best practices they can go through to do that. And it is around actually understanding risks as much as well as the governance side. So, the company needs to make a clear commitment to improving the sustainability of their business. Then they need to be able to carry out, proper, deep risk assessment to identify financially material and high impact issues that do result from, and this is where the E comes back in and the S, but, the climate risk, and potential human rights violations as well. But it's not all very good to do the risk assessment and have the commitment, but you've got to have then a clear action plan to mitigate those. So as I say, you've got to have that proper governance structure, as Jason says, but you've got to understand the risks properly. It's about, you've got two types of climate risks. You've got physical risks, such as a business's reliance and impact on natural capital, being air, land, water, biodiversity. Do you understand those risks? Then there's the transitional risks that can occur as a result in different changes to policies, so climate change policies, energy policies. Obviously, you've seen a lot of that recently. And actually also there's this huge shift to sort of lower carbon technologies. All of these things can impact a company's business model. So understanding those risks are critical and demonstrating to investors that they do so. Also, it's understanding then all of those risks within your supply chain. What are the climate risks? What are the human rights or labor rights issues within your supply chain? Then there can be reputational risks. Do they really understand what those are? I don't know, are there pollutants, for instance, that could be a big risk? And then actually it's about managing those risks. Once you've identified them, how are you going to manage them? Can you set sort of time-bound, measurable targets to manage those risks? Do you have a very clear strategy and policy? Back to governance. And then, actually it's about honesty too. Again, Jason, you talked about trust and we talked about accountability earlier, but are you honest about the risks that you can't manage away? So that's the risk side of it. And then I'll just say, sorry, one more thing is a kind of the opportunity side of it. There's actually big competitive advantages companies can make, sustainable companies can make by actually innovating, making use of new technologies. Is there a plan for your manufacturing process to be adapted to become less polluting? Can you now use renewables instead of fossil fuels? Can you use materials that are being recycled? If investors can see evidence of progress here, this is going to be identified as a good sustainable investment. And then the final point I'd make is around reporting and disclosure on those commitments that you've made. Without clearly defining that, companies have too much flexibility on what they choose to report, and that's not helpful. But conversely, there's also a problem often we see where you get over disclosure. So companies just reporting on everything, on really what are non-material ESG sort of bits of information. Again, it's making sure that you are focusing on the right areas. Otherwise, again, you can be branded as greenwashing.
And I think that's really good description, Rose. I utterly agree with. It's not just about risk and negative impact. It's about opportunity and positive impact in companies. I think the reason companies are seen as so trusted now is because they're the place people look to for providing positive solutions and outcomes. But added to the kind of the reporting and disclosure, I think, is independent assurance. I think that greenwashing is at massive risk if it's purely down to the company to disclose, and there's no independent checking of that based on common standards and agreed criteria. I think that's really important for the company itself to feel confident in what it's disclosing, as well as for investors and other stakeholders to be able to properly trust the information that's being disclosed as well.
Thank you. And Jason, jumping on this, so because you touched upon it, I wanted to help us move into, so we had described what a sustainable, responsible investment and corporate behavior are, but how does greenwashing happen and who's involved? you touched upon standardization and legislation. Can you guide us a bit more through it? What does that mean? It's a lot happening at the EU level, but also like what impact has that maybe on a more local context?
Yeah. I mean, look, I actually think a lot of greenwashing isn't intentional. I think it's actually through either a lack of understanding of a topic or a lack of engagement with stakeholders to really understand the impacts of an organization. I think that's really key to avoid greenwashing. I think also it's a lack of clear standards and regulation to guide business on. I mean, the number of times companies come to us and go, we want to do it right, but we don't know what to do or how to do it. There's all these standards out there and all these guidelines. Which ones we use? And my answer is always, well, you need to figure out what's important to you. You need to develop a strategy to address those issues, and you need to understand both the risks and opportunities, and then disclose and implement. It's companies' duty to really understand topics properly. And I think usually greenwashing occurs when they don't understand those properly. I think you then get, as Rose sort of hinted, this sort of unintended response that people end up disclosing everything that they can because they've got this sort of demand for disclosure and transparency, and they don't go through the proper process of really understanding what is actually material and what isn't material, and who needs to understand what information and provide the information to the right people at the right time in the right place. So, you know, what investors require is very different to what a customer requires or what an employee needs, and you need to establish in different ways. So I think then beyond that, there's sort of unequal incentives or unintended incentivization. And I think most often companies are not incentivized either through a lack of regulation or a lack of reward for actually disclosing properly and being properly transparent. So I think that needs to be upped in its game. And I think investors and in the investment world has a massive role to play in making sure companies are properly incentivized. And there is still a requirement for quarterly returns and a requirement for companies to deliver on long-term ESG outcomes. And I still think that's a challenge for many parts of the investment community. Beyond that, I think holding companies accountable, and I think NGOs play a really important part in holding companies accountable, either to disclose more and be more honest, or when they get it wrong, to actually hold them to account for actually being honest about that and bringing that to light for society.
So, Jason, sorry, just to follow up on that. So, if the movement is growing or developing, legislation and mandatory legislation could help do that pivot that you're talking about, you think?
Yeah, I think it helps massively, and I think we're speaking to a Turkish audience here. Turkey is right next to the EU. Most Turkish businesses that I work with trade massively with the EU. It's a huge source of foreign currency for Turkey and for those businesses. And the EU is really the most advanced area in the world for regulation and sort of formalizing ESG requirements. So we've got the Corporate Social Responsibility Disclosure Directive that's being formed at the moment. It builds on submitting work. I mean, that is really formalizing materiality and then disclosure around financial impacts of ESG. So I think that's really useful. And then the whole Green Deal legislation, including the border tax. So we've got the emissions trading scheme within the EU. Now there's going to be an implementation of ensuring that companies outside the EU can't game the system, have all the emissions outside of the EU and then sell more cheaply into the EU. This is a massive impact in Turkey. I think the advantage that Turkey's companies have is they're used to working in the EU sort of ecosystem, and actually that gives it a head start compared to many other parts of the world. And so that gives Turkey an opportunity to learn and get on the front foot from the EU requirements, but then also to use that sort of advantage.
Jason, thank you. And thank you for the presentation of also the opportunity for the Turkish market in being ahead, tying his tie with what's happening in the EU. But Rose, I wanted to come to you, and Jason mentioned this of the critical role of investors to avoid greenwashing. So I wanted to understand from you what your thoughts are. And
yeah, look, I think the investors have obviously a critical role here. And I talked earlier about this term, being an active owner. What does that mean? It means exercising your voting rights, and it means engaging on any issue with the intent to encourage the company to adopt better sustainability practices, or just at the very least relinquish the poor ones. I think it's really important in this sort of engagement process that investors have clear objectives when they go to a company, and that they've also got clear scope. So, prioritizing the most material issues that they want to engage corporates with, just to make sure that really is sort of value additive for their clients and beneficiaries, and that there is real impact from that engagement. I think investors need to also have a very clear process in articulating what are realistic goals for the companies, and actually also give them a clear indicator of what would be sort of their expectations of success. How is it going to get measured, so that you can ultimately identify the effectiveness of that engagement strategy. So that's sort of the investor's role from one side, and then the corporates themselves have a role to play in this, in that we talked again about trust. They need to be transparent to build trust. This is so important in the investment world. Investors hate the unknown. So the more that they know and understand, back to my points earlier around risk management, the better. So, it's about not cherry picking the bits of your business to report on. This is particularly important for conglomerates, of which in Turkey I know there are a large number. Investors want to understand, the wider risks across the full business, not just part of it. It's about ensuring that the investor relations team is happy to engage with investors, answer their questions proactively, provide any missing data that they're looking for. Again, this helps build trust. As I say, investors like to know what the risks are. If you're transparent and honest on your approach, you're going to gain trust from the investment community. It's not just, reporting something that's an issue isn't an issue as an investor if it's being seen that the company understands it. And this is really important for companies based in emerging markets, because this is actually where perceived risks are higher. Companies that are doing the right thing in terms of people and the environment will ultimately attract better ESG ratings. Those better ESG ratings will lead to that company screening better, and then being included more in clients' investment portfolios. And that ultimately should then lead to share price appreciation. So, I think that's the key points around that role of the investors can play here.
And Rose, thank you so much. And
can I just have one point there about disclosure? Because I think Rose makes a really important point. I've been helping companies disclose sustainability stuff through reporting for 25 years. The most common question I get for first-time reporters is, what are the risks of us reporting? I have never, ever once seen a company suffer in any way from greater disclosure. The only side is upside. People are always worried. They always, it's an uncomfortable thing to be outside if it's done well. Yeah. So I think that's, it's not actually a risk. It's a risk not to disclose.
Exactly. Spot on, Jason.
And in terms of to disclose, you need the data, you need the information. And Rose, you mentioned very well the process of disclosing and engaging, but data has because if you can't measure it, it's difficult. So what is the role of data globally, but also in the Turkish context, in terms of how they're developing their data and measurement and data, and in terms of data providers as well?
Jason, do you want to pick up on the data providers, and then I'll tell it? I'll finish up.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
The PRI in that space.
Yeah, so I just want to rewind just slightly. First of all, I think disclosure is important whether you have data or not. Data is a measure of performance of an issue. and you have to choose the right indicators to properly measure the performance on that issue. So a good example is climate change. If you're only measuring the office energy that you use and you're not talking about the supply chain, which is possibly 80% of your actual emissions, that's poor data, and it would be actually greenwash to just disclose that one bit and not talk about the rest. Fine to say we only understand 20% and we haven't yet measured the other 80%. You know, that's proper disclosure, and just admitting that you don't have that data yet, but committing to gathering it is really important. So it's understanding the context of that data is super important. In terms of providers and ratings agencies, I think they play a valuable role to play, but it has to be done through the lens of materiality. Yeah, just disclosing the 200 data points that rating agencies will look to gather does not give you. So just disclosing the 200 data points that rating agencies requires enough. And investors don't want to just see the data. They want to understand the data around the key risks and opportunities faced by the business. So I think rating agencies provide a really good, broad, quick to access data set for investors. It's a quick win to gather that data through rating agencies, but then it has to be viewed through the materiality lens. What is actually material out of all that information? And how well do the companies really understand their performance? And what strategies have they got to deal with those issues? And data just supports that.
Thank you. And Rose, going back to you, PRI is working on this. Do you want to tell us a bit more what you're doing?
Yeah, no, it's sort of an angle of this. I think we've got a team. I've talked earlier about one of our key purposes is creating a sustainable financial system. And we've got a sort of a key strategic project that we call Driving Meaningful Data. And it was really started in recognition that, there is this global consensus that you need consistent, reliable, comparable sustainability to do. I mean, as Jason's just described, you've got to be able to, assess this risk that we keep talking about for screening purposes, for identifying best-in-class investments, measuring impact, communicating with clients. The list is endless. Data is absolutely critical. So what we do is we obviously got our huge signatory base that we can work with to really get clear understanding, to give us clear signal to the market. What are their data needs? How is that data used to aid decision making? And to better understand our investors' contributions towards generating these sustainability objectives. So, we basically do three key things in this work stream. We engage with the regional and global standard setting processes. So on behalf of our signatories to ensure that their data needs get sort of understood and then fed into some of these big global standard setting initiatives. Then we make sure that we encourage clarification of how ESG ratings get then used in both active and passive, importantly, investment strategies. And then it's all about raising awareness amongst our investor signatories on what's happening. And, just the most latest, example of that work stream is we're currently engaging with a new International Sustainability Standards Board, ISSB. And we're just working with our signatories to make sure we put we provide good feedback into that system, make sure then we share the implications in reverse back to the investors, so they know, what those new standards are going to mean for them. And then actually we've even got, we have some quite deep technical discussions with a specific sort of corporate reporting reference group that we've set up. So it's all about, making sure that their needs get reflected in the new standards that are being created.
Thank you so much, and Jason as well. And we are coming to the end of our session, and I think we just scratched the surface of the issue of greenwashing, but you get both incredible input on best practice. But I wanted to give you both a last 1 minute on how do we move forward on greenwashing? What are the best practices? Rose, you go, and then Jason.
I think if I can take it from the PRI standpoint,
yeah, of course.
Part of our role is, as I say, driving better responsible investment across that financial system. And one of the things we're trying to do is actually showcase and reward good disclosure practices. So that's one of the things that we're doing. And we do this in a couple of ways. We do it through every signatory has to report, and then we score their reporting, and then that becomes publicly available. And so that's one way to showcase, and then we showcase also through sort of different case studies and things like that. And then we actually also have an awards we give out, and you know, we can do that across leaders in different ways. And then the sort of final point from our perspective is obviously this is a space that's moving very fast, and our role as, I guess, an NGO in this space is to make sure we evolve as our signatory base grows, and that we continue to push those standards higher, really with the view that we've got to generate some sort of real world outcomes, real world change on the back of it.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you very much. And disclosure, and good disclosure is key. Thank you very much for the work of PRI. And Jason, what are your words?
I think, first of all, you should disclose, but make sure you understand the issues that you are discussing. You are managed by engaging all your stakeholders across your value chain on issues, understanding which of those are material to you and your stakeholders, and then developing a strategy to deal with the risks and opportunities around those key prioritized issues. Only then really do you need to know what data measures the performance of those issues. Then you need to make sure that data is independently checked when you're disclosing. And you should then disclose transparently all of the information that you have. And I think if you do that, you build trust, and B, you avoid greenwashing. And I think companies that follow that will avoid greenwashing in the very bad things. I think the other thing I'd just like to say is I work quite often with companies and investor relations and investors. Quite often investor relations are a bit of a barrier between the company and the investors. They like to hold on to the relationship. And actually, I would really strongly recommend that investor relations open up the dialogue between the company and the investors directly, and they can act as a facilitator of that dialogue rather than a gatekeeper. And I think that would greatly increase trust and transparency around ESG, because investor relations don't always understand the issues as well as the specialists in the companies that are managing these topics.
Thank you so much. And I thought your points were really insightful, and I really enjoyed the conversation between the three of us. And thank you for the audience for listening in, and we'll speak soon, and enjoy the rest of the summit.